Welcome. This is James Corbett of the Corbett Report with your EyeOpener report for BoilingFrogsPost.com. The idea that global politics is directed by a small group of well-connected elite has long been decried as conspiracy theory by the establishment and their media outlets. As listeners to the most recent Corbett Report podcast will know, however, this idea is now openly discussed and acknowledged by those very figures that once sought to deride it.
You mentioned something earlier that you've done that comes up right in the spot that you're sitting many times by our callers across the country, and that is a suspicion that there is a conspiracy afoot through the Trilateral Commission and the Council on Foreign Relations. You ran the Trilateral Commission for how long?
About 3 years, I think. Something like that, 3 years. Not only did I run it, I helped to found it and organize it with David Rockefeller. So if any of our viewers are conspiracy-minded, here is one of the conspirators.
They call it coordination of regulation. What it really is putting the American economy under international regulation. Yeah. And those people who have been yelling, oh, the UN's going to take over global
conspiracy
government.
Theorists.
They've been crazy, but now they're right.
Yeah, well, when
it's happening.
When Geithner said he would be open to the idea of a global currency last week,
yeah.
Those conspiracy people had said and suggested that for years. Right. You're not wrong.
The reality is it's not conspiracy. What brings this group its power is that very often these very different, very diverse people find that their interests align. And when the interests of the most powerful align about taxes, or about regulation, or about politics, or about global warming, they have, wait for it, more power than the least powerful people, right? And there is a multiplication that comes from the networks that connect them together. And so this is, an extremely important component of their power.
In fact, while these types of admissions may be new in our current socio-political context, they have been well known, well understood, and widely promulgated by respected statesmen and scholars for centuries. In a letter to George Snyder on October 24, 1798, first U.S. President George Washington warned that the doctrines of the Illuminati had spread in the United States, adding that the notion that members of secret societies were trying to separate the American people from their government is too evident to be questioned. In 1828, the Anti-Masonic Party became America's first third-party political grouping. The party was formed after the murder of Freemasonic whistleblower William Morgan. The Morgan affair ignited anger in a public that was becoming weary of Masonic influence over their society, and the Anti-Masonic Party was surprisingly popular in the 1828 elections, introducing the concepts of nominating conventions and political platforms to U.S. electoral politics. In his 1913 book, The New Freedom, President Woodrow Wilson, whose presidency saw the introduction of the Federal Reserve, the first income tax, and the proposal for the League of Nations, wrote, "Some of the biggest men in the United States, in the field of commerce and manufacture, are afraid of somebody, are afraid of something. They know that there is a power somewhere so organized, so subtle, so watchful, so interlocked, so complete, so pervasive, that they had better not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it." One of the most scholarly treatises on this subject in the 20th century came from the pen of Georgetown scholar and respected historian Carroll Quigley. An influential political scholar whose students included the likes of Bill Clinton, Quigley wrote extensively about the organizations controlling world politics from behind the scenes and the methods they used to achieve their goals in works like The Anglo-American Establishment and Tragedy and Hope. As researcher and author G. Edward Griffin explains, Quigley outlined how these secret organizations direct world politics by creating a network of interlocking organizations able to influence policymakers and decision-takers around the world.
The structure that Cecil Rhodes created, and remember this is all described primarily by Professor Quigley, was outwardly modeled after the Jesuit order. That's right. I was surprised to read that. The Jesuit order? Quigley was a great admirer of the structure of the Jesuits, and he decided to model his secret society after that structure. But at the deeper level, it was clear that he borrowed the structure from the Illuminati. And now everyone knows that the Illuminati existed at one time. It was created in 1776 by Adam Weishaupt, but shortly thereafter it was exposed in Bavaria. The police raided it, they arrested its members, they discovered its ledgers and its books and its papers, which is why we know so much about them. They're part of the public record now. We know what the Illuminati was trying to do and how they were structured and how they organized and so forth. And so that's part of the record, but we are told that the Illuminati ceased to exist after that date. I think it probably did. But whether it did or not, certainly others, like Cecil Rhodes, picked it up. They picked up the concept. I don't know if there's a historical continuity back to Adam Weishaupt. I don't think it makes an awful lot of difference when we realize that there are people like Cecil Rhodes who read Adam Weishaupt's work and said, hey, this is a good idea. Let's use it. And that's basically what Cecil Rhodes did. He adopted the strategy that Weishaupt created of, he called it rings within rings within rings. That means that the center of the secret society would be run by one individual with perhaps a little brain trust around him of 2 or 3 people. They would be the absolute rulers of this whole structure. Then they would create around them a ring, as they called it, a larger organization, which they would dominate. They would control it absolutely from the center. But the other members who were recruited into this larger organization would not be allowed to know that there was an inner control and direction. They were brought in for a lesser view of the whole purpose. And that was the outer ring, and that might be 20, 30, 50 people, maybe 100 people. And then outside of that, there would be a larger ring, another organization created with hundreds of people, perhaps thousands of people. And they would not be allowed to know, or would they even suspect, that there was an inner ring controlling the larger outer ring. And this is what Weishaupt called rings within rings within rings. Cecil Rhodes thought that was a dandy idea, and so he adopted it as the structure for his secret society.
What one develops through an exploration of Quigley's writings is not some easily parodied amorphous conspiracy of them and some vaguely defined Illuminati that may or may not have anything to do with the Bavarian Order of the Illuminati founded by Adam Weishaupt in 1776, but an interlocking series of centrally controlled organizations of interest populated mostly by those on the outer circle who have no idea what agenda those on the inner circle are aiming at. In this view, the conspiracy is not monolithic, but made up of groupings of individuals united by a common ideology, sometimes with differing views of how to achieve their goals. In 2009, I had the chance to talk to G. Edward Griffin about what he believes to be the uniting ideology behind these various groups.
The underlying engine for almost all of the problems that concern us today is an ideology of all things. It's not even people. Oh, yes, there are people with names and they hold positions and all of that, but they're always changing. Those people are replaced by other people. And if you look at the common thread between them, it's that they share a common ideology. They all think the same. And so it really makes no difference who is in power or who holds that particular position. Nothing really changes. We've noticed as we go from one decade to the next, from one political party to the next, from one regime to the next, people die, new ones come up, nothing changes. The trend just continues. And it's because all of those people in the chain of command have shared an ideology. Well, what is the ideology? It's called collectivism. It's a strange word to the ear for many people today, but as I was doing my research a little while ago, I discovered that the word collectivism was quite commonly used and well understood about a century ago. You'll find it a lot in the political writings of our forefathers and the historians of the time. And when you start analyzing it, we realize that today's world and yesterday's world hasn't really changed that much except words. The underlying struggle is between two ideologies, two political views. One is collectivism and the other one is individualism. And there again is a word that hasn't been very well used of late, but it's very common in the older literature. But these words I'm attempting to revive and cause people to understand the differences between collectivism and individualism. And although we don't have the time for this brief session to go into it all, I'll just give you an overview. Collectivism is the concept of great big government, of control from the top down, all power at the top, and the people at the bottom being but mere little serfs and servants of the larger group, the society, the state, the government. Individualism is the other way around, just tip the pyramid upside down, that the foundation of the whole society is the individual, and the purpose of society is to protect the rights of the individual and to guard the individual even against the group if necessary. And so they're two entirely different philosophies. The underlying philosophy of collectivism is that the group is more important than the individual, and that the individual must be sacrificed if necessary for the greater good of the greater number.
If we are to find the organizing principle of these interlocking societies in the philosophy of collectivism and the quest for world government, the obvious question is, who are these people and what organizations are part of this conspiracy? For those with even a slight acquaintance with this subject, there are obvious and well-known examples. The Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberg Group. In this series of EyeOpener reports, we will examine some of the lesser-known groups that constitute part of this system of rings within rings. The Royal Institute of International Affairs, the Canadian Council of Chief Executives, Common Purpose UK. Meanwhile, it's important to note that this conspiracy is not the monolithic, all-seeing, all-knowing, all-powerful cabal that controls every event in the world, however much those in positions of genuine political power would like the public to see them in that light. Instead, they are people motivated by a shared goal who are privy to all of the common failings of organizations: insularity, hubris, infighting, irrationality. As such, it is also important to note that just because a small number of people currently wield enormous power in world politics does not mean that it necessarily has to be so. Instead, an informed, engaged, motivated, and active citizenry must be organized to counter this conspiracy, and it must do so by refusing to be intimidated by conspiracy theory labels or other cheap rhetorical tactics, and deal with the facts as they present themselves. This video is brought to you by the subscribers of BoilingFrogsPost.com. For more information on this and other topics, please go to BoilingFrogsPost.com. For more information and commentary from James Corbett, please go to CorbettReport.com. Available now from BoilingFrogsPost.com.
They arrested me for taking pictures. That was obvious. Well, they couldn't really write that in their arrest report. So they said, well, he was standing in the middle of the street. He was blocking traffic.
DNA profiles of innocent people arrested in England and Wales can now only be held by police for a maximum of 6 years.
The technological police state that we see developing today is the access to advanced methods and techniques of control.
On the ground!
This technology is not the stuff of sci-fi fantasy, but increasingly a part of our everyday lives. The new Boiling Frogs Post DVD, The Police State, available from BoilingFrogsPost.com. Including all 4 episodes of the Police State series of James Corbett's EyeOpener report, 2 bonus EyeOpener reports, an exclusive interview with BoilingFrogsPost.com member Andrew Gavin Marshall, and a Paul Jamiel political cartoon gallery. Order your copy today at BoilingFrogsPost.com.